Hey, welcome back everybody. This is Ian, and in this video, I am going to be interviewing the Primeagen.
Hey, howdy. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, thanks for being on. Appreciate that. Just to give you some context, my audience is entry-level devs to maybe some mid-tier devs, and so they're very interested in someone like your journey from where they are currently to where you are, and some of the pitfalls that you can watch out for, some ways to optimize the journey, any tips and advice that you have.
As far as, how the journey starts off, it starts off like any other journey, one step at a time. I went to college not quite knowing what I wanted to do, but knowing that I wanted to be in computer science. Wanted to program computers as far as I could remember, trying from installing Doom to playing around with code in some sort of video game. I've always had some sort of either affinity or interest within computers. From there on, honestly, while I was in college, I got my butt handed to me. I was never a good student, never been a good student, never wanted to be a good student. Excluding all the other lifestyle decisions I have made. I have elaborated that in videos I've made and all that, kind of cutting that part out. Um, After many attempts, I started kind of like steamrolling, if you will. Things started building off each other. Everything started kind of falling into place. And after many, many years of effort, they went from being very, very difficult to being significantly easier. I felt like I could really do anything, long as I just really put down the real effort, not, like, oh, I went to class and put in an hour effort, but actually like the massive amount of time that it actually takes to be able to do anything and do it well. And so as that kept kind of rolling and I kept finding more success, I kept doing more and more of it. And I just generally enjoyed programming. I started off with Java. Loved it, absolutely thought it was the best. I never thought I always thought, why would you ever want a dynamic language? Then I did JavaScript for a while and thought, oh, this is great. Why would you ever want like a statically typed language? And then I went back and I did C for a couple years professionally. And I thought, why would you ever want to do JavaScript? And then I went and did JavaScript professionally. I thought, why would I ever want to do C again? Right. And so over the course of many years of of either starting my own company or going into jobs, one thing that has kind of remained true is that unless if like at least for me, unless if I am programming a massive amount of hours, I do not see how you can get very good. Like I didn't grow up with AI or even LSPs. And so I kind of had to do it the old fashioned way, a bunch of looking up docs and reading and kind of just going through this rote memory process. And I think the number, like if we're going to talk about pitfalls, I personally think the number one pitfall of all incoming junior level people and even mid level people is that they have no value of rote learning. Everyone's just like, why would I memorize that when I can look it up? The point is that you don't have to look it up. You don't have to think about it. Your hands flow as naturally as your brain thinks. You're able to not be distracted by these small things. Like when I watch my son go through his homework, especially when it comes to math, he just kind of, just due to COVID and the years he was in school, he has a lot of troubles with some of his basic addition where he's just not as fast as I think he should be. And so we've actually been doing and going back to the addition table, and it's really just helped him just rote learn that thing. And then it makes all the other parts of math and everything else super easy because he doesn't have to think about the small individual pieces. They just kind of flow together to make the bigger picture. And I think it's the exact same when it comes to people doing any sort of programming, which is that we've all sacrificed our addition table or our multiplication table because we can just look it up, right? We have our calculator in a pocket. Why would I ever do that? I can just look it up. And people tell you this constantly on Twitter. People tell you don't need to learn hard skills. I just massively disagree with them. I think it's fun and it's good. And at the end of the day, it's so much more fun to be competent than to Google every last thing. The fact that you can't start or be able to build a project without having to Google 1,000 things or have to rely heavily on AI to autocomplete everything for you should be an alarm bell. It should not be like, oh, I'm being successful because I can have an end product at the end. Like your goal should not just simply to be output, but also what it takes to create that output. Because 100% of the time, the more you have to spend time on considering what you're doing as opposed to the thing you're actually doing, the worse I think the outcome or the product will be. Because I don't think you can dream big enough. I don't think you can think of problems big enough. I don't think you can solve big enough problems because you're constantly stuck in this like small little kind of myopic world because that's all you've ever got to. And so like the big thing for me, I think where I almost drew all of my success was that I just programmed nonstop and learned everything I could. I learned every last little bit I could. I tried to understand jQuery the best I could possibly understand jQuery back in the jQuery days. May not understand the jQuery days. I got really good at Grunt, be able to, write my own plugins and everything back when we had to do build processes via Grunt. When we didn't have Grunt, I figured out how to make a module tree and be able to take all of our, uh, individual JavaScript files, concat them in the correct order, and just have JavaScript execute all at once. I had to build my own bundler at one point. Those were back in the day. It's just fun times. And so that's just what I think has led to all of my success is the fact that I've never once thought, oh, this problem's too big. I've always just simply said, I could take on this problem. Now I may need to look up some stuff that I didn't know how to write to a file. So I got to go look up how to write to a file, right? Like you got to you got to discover some things if you've never done it before. And so it's just like going through that process of learning more and more about your language until the point you can just run really, really fast in it. And there you go. There's my short answer, maybe to a long question or a long answer to a short question. Couldn't really tell which one we're going for there, but it's just I've been on this kind of internal kick lately about this idea of rote memory and how much we've kind of lost that practice.
Yeah, it's interesting because, well, first of all, it sounds like if I had to summarize what you said, at least initially, like there are no shortcuts. And
Never will be.
these days, it's like it feels like there might be because of the advent of some of these AI tools and whatnot. But what we're seeing, I think, is some inherent atrophy from people who are just taking their brain out, putting it in a jar, and going, write it for me, solve it for me. And they're getting good at like maybe that portion of the skill, but they don't have that foundation from all the hours you put in to see it and go, that's wrong, and that's wrong, and or just the necessary knowledge to make better prompts to begin with. One of my big things as an instructor is I see kind of the flip side of this where students are coming in with like the way we're taught in school. Like I have to memorize this for the test, brain dump sort of thing. And I'm
Yeah.
like, you do need to, at least I personally feel like you do need to embrace the fact that you can Google. You don't have to know everything, but you should have a
Yeah.
solid foundation. Like you got to put in the work and the time and the energy, and then later you're going to have to flex that muscle on Googling as well, because you just like now with AI, like you have to be able to see that's the Stack Overflow answer, or that portion of it is what I need, and that part's wrong.
Yeah.
But that comes long after you've put in all the hard work, I feel like.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of that does exist, which is that yeah, I mean, you can't know everything. At some point, you have to Google the thing, or you have to ask the AI, "How does this thing work?" I don't think there's anything wrong. In fact, I was just asking the AI all sorts of questions. If you can see my screen, all sorts of questions about why do we have a connection upgrade versus an upgrade WebSocket? Why is connection hop by hop directive versus for proxies and gateways versus this? And just because the reality is, if I go over here and I go into this thing, I'm going over here and I'm just going through the entirety of the semantics protocol, and that part just is just kind of poorly worded in chapter 7 of this thing. And so I'm just like, why are these things existing? Why should I have to do those? Why do we, it's like they can summarize it from another angle, and it's a great tool to learn how to use as far as research goes for concrete subjects. Obviously, be careful about anything that's cutting edge. People are always like, oh, it's great for research. It's actually horrible for research. Anything that's cutting edge, like ChatGPT is not going to have any of it. So it's like, be very careful about that aspect. But it's really great for like a very well established RFCs and stuff. You can ask it all the questions and it can come out with the information and even give you links inside of it and all that. So obviously Google is extremely important, and what you memorize is extremely important. You should not memorize every line of how Quicksort or Dijkstra's algorithm or these things work. You should memorize the functional steps it takes to do that. So that way you can like effectively reverse engineer out the code. That's one thing I see, especially younger kids do, is that they try to memorize code. Like memorizing code is stupid. Memorizing what you need to do makes perfect sense, right? Like you don't have to tell me like if you need me to start a quick web server that serves out static, HTTP or HTML/JavaScript stuff, just doing simple no cache, just like here's a server, here's just raw dog a server and create it really quickly. It's like, yeah, I know exactly what that requires. That requires me creating a new server, setting up the routes, adding logging if I want it, and then start the process, right? Like, so it's like I know those steps. So now it's like, okay, let's use Golang's Echo, or let's go use Express. Like, it doesn't really matter because they're the same thing. I know the steps. I don't have to know the code. And I can always look up or go read the documentation on Echo how to do each one of those things. That's fine. Or even ask ChatGPT if I really, really want to, but I know how to do the thing. And the same thing with algorithms. Like I can right now whip out in probably 2 to 5 minutes binary search on an array. Obviously, like, 45 seconds on a tree, just because I know exactly why and how it works, but I don't know any of the code. Like, I don't remember the code. I know there's like a while loop or something involved, but I can kind of recreate that because I know the exact steps. And this is like good information to have. I don't think that is ever a bad thing to understand why logarithmic search exists and how it exactly works. Right? Like, those are good things to have in your brain because you'll run into it, every 6 months you'll run into something that's like, oh, I need this. This sucks because it's not logarithmic. Here, let me go find the thing that makes it work, right? It's just like, it's good to have those things. They're built into you. They're just built in. They're ready to come out when they need to come out. And that's it. And I don't memorize the code. I memorize the process.
It's funny how often I encounter binary search in real life. Like
Yeah.
someone's like, "Oh, we have a problem. There's a bug. We can't figure out." I'm like, "Okay, well, there's 200 commits between when it was working and right now, or whatever." So we just cut that in half. Is it broken still? Okay, go this way. Is it working yet? Okay, go that way. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
that. So like having that fundamental knowledge, you're right. Then you get into, you just pseudocode it and you go, okay, what areas of the whatever language I'm using do I need to use to make
Yeah.
this into code? So that
It just makes it way easier.
yeah. Oh, that's great. So a moment ago, you pulled up what looked like a man page in Vim, or NeoVim.
It's
maybe.
not a man page of Vim. I just copy and pasted the RFC,
Oh,
RFC
okay.
9110, which is just HTML. So in earlier versions of the HTTP spec, it would be like HTTP 1. And then they decided, no, we're going to make HTTP semantics that's going to contain everything for HTTP 1, 2, and 3 into it. And then we'll make smaller versions that are just like the HTTP 1 portion because it's encoding versus the semantic meaning of it all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Darn, I was wishing it would have been Vim so that we could transition
It
into...
is Vim.
Oh, it is
I
Vim.
copy
Okay,
and
good.
pasted. Yeah.
Oh,
Don't
I
worry.
see,
No,
I see.
in fact,
Gotcha.
it's not just Vim, it's NeoVim, by the way.
Yay! So that's a good transition into the next topic I wanted to talk about, because your name is very closely tied to NeoVim on YouTube. So let's talk about developer productivity. At what point does it make sense to learn something like Vim or NeoVim to start increasing your productivity? And like, what are like the major takeaways there? What's the argument for doing that versus like getting really good at something like VS Code with all the powerful plugins and everything that it has?
So I would completely like redo the question altogether. What I would say is it important to understand your environment and the tools you use, and have you used them to the best of your ability? Now, VS Code versus NeoVim, as far as like using it as an editor, I don't think you're gonna like. I don't think there's like a good argument where you can just say why you should just use one versus the other. Just because this is really coming down to a lot of preferences and things that you like. If you've never used one to the point where you feel proficient in it versus the other, I do think you should go off and try to do that, right? Like, explore the world. Just because you think you found something that works for you, that just doesn't mean that there isn't even better things that are waiting for you to go be discovered. That's like a common thing people do, a common pitfall. The first thing they use is the first thing they keep on using because it's just comfortable, as opposed to like just challenging yourself and all that. But I will make the very hot take kind of argument, which is Vim Motions, not Vim the editor, is vastly more important for you to learn. And if you feel like your typing speed or you can't touch type and all that, it just exposes this just inexperience with the tools you have to use all the time. Like, I doubt that programming is going to move into some sort of voice world for a long time because it's just really hard to try to, like, chat GPT has to be good enough to take your job before voice is going to really actually work. And so it's like you're going to be cranking away on this keyboard for the next at least 10 plus years. So you might as well be proficient at it. And so that's kind of like what it exposes. And then just the desire to become good at it, because I do not think you can edit text or navigate through your project as well if you just don't have a keyboard centric type of approach. That will always be vastly superior because anytime you have to go to your mouse, you have to look for your mouse. Once you find your mouse, you have to move your mouse like your Shroud, becoming a first-person shooter to find the place you want to click. Then you can do like a control click on it, or you can do, I mean, some people even still like right-click, go to declaration, do all that stuff, right? Like, that's just nonsense. Don't do that stuff. Whereas something with Vim, it's more of a, I'm going to jump X lines, back one, GD, jump to definition, right? You have all these things kind of mapped in your brain. And I think that's like always going to be a superior form of editing, just the amount of different text combinations and language. But Vim itself, like now you're getting into a whole different thing. Like, do you like customizing? Is it something you want to do? Do you want to make an environment specifically and solely for yourself? I think the answer should be yes, ultimately. But obviously, that's not everyone's desire in life, and that's fine. Just because when you do something like that, you are building an editor for yourself. You're not building someone else's editing experience. You're building your experience. And maybe you just want to be on VS Code. Maybe you don't want to do those things. Maybe you don't think you want to do those things, and that's fine. You don't have to do those things. And so that's kind of how I think about it, which is it's not about productivity as much because the productivity only comes when you're like fully bought in. Because once you're fully bought in, you have everything specifically designed for you and you alone. Well, that thing's going to pay out dividends as time goes on, and you're going to get more and more kind of control over exactly everything you want. That's completely different. But just the ability to edit text well, Vim motions are, I would argue, probably the most superior to anything else. Like, that just is. Just will probably always be that way.
And you can bring those into basically any popular editor.
Any popular editor or even unpopular editor.
Yeah, the thing you mentioned before resonates with like the first thing people use. They tend to stick with it. I don't know how long I used Sublime Text for before I moved on to something else. And it's just this weird mental thing where you're like, oh, scary, something new. And then you try it.
Yeah.
And, you know, like you mentioned earlier about the languages where you're like, Java's king and then JavaScript and then so on and so forth. I think the same type of pattern occurs with editors where like when I finally made the jump to VS Code, I was like, this is the best. And then I switched to Vim and I was like, this is even better. And it's like, the nice thing about NeoVim sounds like is maybe no two persons NeoVim is the same once they're configured to their like personal settings and everything.
I think that's the ultimate destination of Vim, or that's the point of Vim, which is you have all the tools you need to be able to create your version of the thing. Now, there's obviously like most people use the very similar stuff, like GD for jump to definition. You hook into your LSP when your LSP turns on for a buffer. A buffer is just like any open file. When it is on for that specific file, you can remap GD, which does a Vim jump to definition, to LSP jump to definition, right? There's things like that that you can kind of like override to make a better experience, and everybody effectively has the same thing. So then it's like, okay, we all have GD, right? Okay, that's fine. But there's like plenty of little things that, like I use Dvorak. And so I also wrote my plugin Harpoon, which means that I bind my fast files to the home row on my power hand of Dvorak. And so it's just like, they're like right there on the home row when I press control. That's probably just uniquely mine. I assume most people using Coerty would find my home row power files very kind of just like an odd placement because they'd be all over and, uniquely weird. Whereas maybe the idea could be great. Maybe that's what you want for you.
That's wild. How long did it take you, do you think, between switching from like traditional QWERTY with whatever regular keyboard to your current setup before like your brain started making those connections and it became natural for you to not even look at the keyboard and know exactly where everything was?
Dvorak was particularly hard. I never look at the keyboard, by the way. So even when I was learning Dvorak, when I was at 10 words per minute, I just refuse to ever look at the keyboard, right? That's like step one. You know where the keys are. You can press all the keys. You've done it like 1,000 bajillion times. Just don't even look. And then once you kind of get over that, hey, I don't need to look thing, it's kind of like riding a bike for the first time. It starts to go a little bit faster, but man, it was a pretty tough transition from QWERTY to Dvorak. So the first month was pretty rough. I still remember having like anxiety, having to answer emails. That was just, it was rough. Also, my keyboard was just like the print on it was just QWERTY. So it's not like I didn't have like a Dvorak keyboard. It was just a X11 XKB software remap. So it's just that's just what it was. And so, I couldn't even look at the keyboard anyways. I still can't look at the keyboard. And so when I would, the first month, that was really awful. As far as like going to something like this, if you mean like the goofy keyboard and all that, that was just like 0 seconds. I don't know. I felt like for the first weekish, the first day, I was kind of soft on it. Like I didn't really know what I was doing. And then for the first week, I had like one little thing that was kind of wrong here. But generally, it's just, I'm on it for like 50 hours. It's going to start feeling normal fairly quick.
Yeah.
And so I was already a good typer before. So it's just like, okay, I'm just doing slight finger shifting.
I mean, even this, with regards to what we were talking about earlier, like there are no shortcuts. You just have to do it and do it and do it until it's done, and then keep doing it until you want to do something different.
And then keep doing it after that. Programming is a lot like running a marathon, and your prize for winning the marathon is to run another marathon. Like it's just really brutal.
Yeah, yeah,
Like if you
yeah.
have any other mentality, you'll just be disappointed.
That's great. So you and I met at Laracon this year. I think you recognized me as a popular YouTuber. I think you came up to me and you were like, "Hey, man, can you interview me?" And I was like, "Who are you?" And then I thought, oh,
Yep.
yeah,
I
yep,
remember all those
yep,
things.
that
Yeah.
checks out. Right, right, yeah, yeah. So you gave a talk there, and the gist of it was like betting on yourself. So I think that
Yep.
probably resonates with a lot of really all developers, but specifically makers and developers, especially in the earlier stages of their journey. So can you kind of give a cliff notes on that talk?
The kind of the general cliff notes, or I'd say the key quote from it, which is, given enough time and determination, you can do anything. Like I am not convinced that I mean I know there's a subset of people. Obviously, every time you do that, there's always that Twitter guy that, well, actually, yes, there's always going to be somebody that has some sort of mental deficiency that makes the problem harder. Maybe that time factor has to grow, but the determination is going to be a constant. Like even if you are a smart person, you still have to try really, really hard to become good at something. And maybe if you have some sort of deficiency, I have dyslexia, I have ADHD, I could check some of those boxes as why it's not feasible or as easy for me. I just kind of refuse to do those things and just say I will figure these things out. I will try harder and be more mature than how I feel. And I know that is like a really hated phrase, and people they don't want that to be an answer because that means that I'm the one that's in the driver's seat. I'm the one that's responsible for either my successes or my failures. But I think that that is part of the reality is that if you are mature enough to say no to how you feel and do the thing that is hard, I think you will be, statistically speaking, more likely to be successful, to learn hard things, to be, really good at your craft, and to rise in the ranks of any company, or even to be able to build your own startup faster and easier with more consistency, simply because you didn't allow how you feel to kind of dictate your action set. And that's really, I would say, the kind of the core the crux of what I talked about, which is that we live in a kind of a wonky world where people are given the okay to have excuses not to try. And that's really sad because it's not that I mean, the problem is that it makes you feel better in the moment. But ultimately, it leads you into a life where you just are constantly never doing the thing you actually really want to do. And instead, you're just so willingly to give up on stuff, and it actually just leads to a sadder existence. And I just don't think that that's good for people. I don't think people are designed to simply say, "Well, I mean, I can't do it because." And it's just like, yeah, you're right. I still always think about one guy. His name was Nate. He was awesome. I had lunch with him in the hall of Johnson or Miller Dining Hall at between South and North Hedges in Bozeman, Montana. Go Bobcats. And during this time, Nate, I mean, when people say they're on the spectrum, like this guy's on Rainbow Road, right? He's way out there. He is exceptionally just incapable of making friends. He really, really struggled. And I remember seeing him, so I sat down, just kind of had lunch with him and started talking to him. And some other friends just started kind of just inviting him and having him come hang out with stuff. And by the end of the year, like the difference between what he was in the beginning, which was just truly an incapable, like social creature, to the end being the person that's just talking to everybody, like completely changed. You can just see that, like, yeah, we all have hurdles, and there is something to hurdles that will always hold somebody bit like more back than say me or somebody else. I think I've been generally gifted with linear like logic and mathematics skills. It was hard for me to get those started, but I think as I got them, they really kicked on. Uh, but nonetheless, I think anybody can improve from their current position and do something significantly better or way better than what anyone thought they could be. And so that's kind of like my whole rawr, that's my mantra is the cheering on of what people can achieve, not what holds them back.
It extends far beyond software development or even content creation. Like that's just good life advice. Like we are living in a time where momentary satisfaction is just like left, right, and sideways. You just turn on your phone, boom, dopamine, like you got whatever. And it is becoming more and more acceptable to just be okay with that versus going outside your comfort zone. And while it is encouraged in some circles, it's not like commonplace for people to be like, yeah, you should do what makes you uncomfortable
Yeah.
because on the other side of that discomfort is what you really want. Like your desires are out here, and sure, you can sit here in this little safe area and do all these things that make you feel good. But at the end of the day, you're going to keep looking out there in the future, wondering, dang, when am I going to take the step or the steps, the many steps, and potentially lots of failures and discomforts to achieve that much larger desire that's going to bring some truer satisfaction.
Yeah. My wife always says the phrase, choose your heart, which is that, I mean, this goes for anything. I think the most simple and obvious one is working out. Uh, you can just not work out. It's not hard to not work out, right? Like that's kind of more of our default position in this culture. But on the other side of not working out, you are, I mean, there's a cajillion statistics working against you at that point. More likely to die young of heart disease, like all the 9,000 cajillion things that go with the fact that you didn't work out and you lived a very sedentary lifestyle. Okay. So that's a hard. It's going to be harder to get up to do stuff. It's going to be harder to play with your kids. You want to go on a hike, but now it's just like you're just so out of shape that it becomes an impossibility. You no longer even get that as an option to do things, right? So there's this thing that pays off over time, and that's a choosing your heart. Either you wake up and do the hard thing, which could be working out, to get the easy, but that's a hard you chose, or by not choosing to do the hard thing, you are choosing to do a different hard thing. They're both hard, and they're both going to be uncomfortable, and they're both, I mean, you're not going to be happy all the time with them, but like that is the choice you are making. And it's the same thing with programming. It's the same thing with anything. I've recently, I mean, I've been going to bed much, much earlier, which means that I can't stay up. I can't watch any Netflix. I can't do any of those things, but I'm choosing a hard. The hard is either I have to feel like crap the next day or I have to say no to the temporary pleasures of being able to watch something. And so it's like, okay, I have to choose, I have to make a choice here. They're both one or the other. I also quit drinking wine in the evening because, again, it's like either I get to have this nice, relaxing, great experience. And even though I don't buy really expensive wine, I was fine drinking fairly cheap wine. Nonetheless, it's like either I get to have the immediate enjoyment or feel just that much better in the morning. Because even though one glass of wine, you won't really notice it, but when you're not doing it, you do notice it. And so it's just like these are all choices. And these aren't, some people laugh like, oh, that's not a hard choice. But, it can be a hard choice when you want to have a glass of wine, then now you just have to say, no, I'm going to say no for future me. It's just another one of these future making decision processes and it's unfun. And then it's better, the next morning you're happy about it, but during the time you were not happy about it.
100%. I feel like there's a self-sabotaging aspect though where like you choose the harder thing, you go to bed early, and you've convinced yourself, okay, I know there's a benefit in the future, and when I get there and I feel better and I'm rested and all these things, I'm going to appreciate having made this decision not to stay up for an extra hour and a half watching whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then for me anyway, I get to that point of feeling great, having all the energy because I'm going to bed early. And then I'm like, oh, I'm bulletproof. Like, it won't hurt to, stay up late this one night. And then it's like, you kind of go back to the start. And then you have to make those hard decisions all over again, which, it's the way it is. You're basically, it's constant trade-offs, right? You're just deciding in the moment, okay, do I want this right now feel good or do I want to feel good later?
I heard gosh, I can't remember. I can't remember if he is a preacher or not a preacher. I can't, it was so long ago. I can't, either way, he was on stage talking, and that's all I remember about the situation. But he said that, gosh, I don't even remember. Honestly, I can't remember anything. It's disembodied. I don't even have a picture of who this person was even talking. I don't even know if it was a boy or girl. I have no idea who it was. I just remember this line coming out. He said something along the lines of, you make a choice way beforehand. So I'm not going to drink wine tonight. I'm making that choice now. So when the time comes, I'm not just letting loose or anything like that. But I'm also this weekend going to go on a date with my wife. And so we have already pre-chosen that. So I'm like, okay, I will have one or two drinks while I'm out with my wife on that one. This is a date I've already pre-planned some point in the future. Because that way it's not like you just store it all up and then you explodiate. Instead, you just like, I have these pre-planned things in the future that are more rare, attempting to always keep that rare. But I know that thing's coming. I always try to have that in my head, just because I feel like it just makes the everyday sacrifice is a lot easier knowing like, okay, I have these four things planned over the course of the next 2 months, and I will still be able to enjoy the things I actually enjoy, but I won't be doing it on like a chronic basis. It's on a rarity basis. And so that just makes it, I don't know, just makes it things that feel easier to me.
I want to say this isn't like directly related, but if you've read the Atomic Habits book, which I haven't, I think I read like the Cliff Notes, but one of
That does
the
not count.
one of the aspects of like developing a new habit is to make it rewarding, like to make it easy. And it kind of goes in reverse to get rid of like a habit that you don't want to have. Like you make it
Mhm.
difficult and you make it, out of reach and da da da. Almost having, as a reward in the future, okay, we are planning to do this thing. It's like twofold. Like A, you're rewarding yourself for like your, everything between now and then, but you're kind of fighting against like being impulsive in the moment.
Mhm.
Like even though it's the same action, right? You are going to drink wine or you are going to stay up late, you are going to watch a movie, whatever it may be. Like you made that decision long in advance, as opposed to in the moment, you're just like, I wanted this thing. Okay, I give myself that thing. So you get that instant satisfaction, which I think is a lot different than planned
Yeah.
reward for a lot of other things that happened long before it that weren't so easy.
I mean, I think the general idea is that you can't make excuses or decisions in the moment. Instead, you have the kind of route pre-planned, and you know there's something ahead that always makes things easier. And it just kind of reflects human behavior, generally speaking. Like, what part of life in any culture around the world was there not like seasons of hard work and seasons of some sort of celebration? Seasons of work, seasons of celebration. And sometimes they were bigger, sometimes they're shorter, sometimes the celebrations were super large, sometimes they were much smaller, right? Like there's just like a whole series of that happens universally in humankind. And so it's like I think that the same thing you got to apply that same idea in life. I think that's also why a lot of corporate culture is just sometimes so like dying on the inside is because there's no seasonality to it. There's no like there's nothing that reflects kind of the last 10,000 years of humanity in it. It's just like every day I'm going to push the boulder slightly forward every single day, all the time. There's not like we have this goal that's like right there. We have to clear these next, these 400 acres. And then when we're done, we get to all sit back for a week and celebrate, right? Like that that does not a thing. There's no existing of that. There's nothing in that in tech culture or in modern, workplace of anything. And so I think there's like that. It just kind of is like this. It's like a game of golf. There's just like progressive versions of the exact same problem over and over again, or recursive versions of the same problem in every part of life. And so it's just like trying to apply more maybe human history to your own life
Mm-hmm.
makes it nice.
Yeah. Yep. The thing you mentioned earlier about like, you make these decisions to be sedentary, not to work out. It's easier not to work out than to do the hard thing and work out. But then like you can't play with your kids, you can't hike, whatever it may be. I was watching Planet Earth 2 the other day, and I'm paraphrasing, but essentially, the lions try to get the draft gets away, and the narrator says something super epic like, um, no lion fails more often than a lion that lives in the present. And it's basically like, yeah, you can choose to not chase the giraffe, but you will die a lot sooner
Yeah.
than the lion that fails at it, but tries it over and over and over again until they finally get the giraffe.
Yeah. I like that. Based phrase, Planet Earth too.
Predator 2 has got some total zingers in it. I heard that and I
That
was
that
like,
sounds that honestly it just sounds like a Wayne Gretzky quote. It's just a reformation of you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
yeah, yeah.
Michael Scott.
Michael Scott. Perfect, perfect. I didn't know what based meant until after I encountered the HTMX community. And I was like, I gotta look this thing up because I'm just, regardless of the fact that I'm on the internet all the time for work, I just don't really like plug into, pop culture or like anything that's current. Yeah, I looked that up and I was like, oh, good, I know what that is now. And then someone commented based on one of my videos the other day, and I was like, I may be old, but I know what that means.
Getting them hip with those kids. Hey, fellow kids, how do you do?
Yeah.
Based as always.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know my memes now.
Yeah, I'm definitely more on the internet. I'm more on those things. I try to learn some of them, but I think people would be surprised at how little actual content I consume. I predominantly just make the things. I don't really look or read or do anything else at other stuff, just because I don't. It's not that I don't have an interest in it. It's just that I just don't have any time to do it.
You
I've just
seem
chosen not to do the thing. That's all.
you seem very, very busy. I mean, we tried to schedule this back in like what was it, like August or September or something like
Whenever
that.
Laracon
It was
was, yeah.
a while back. Hey, I want to fast forward though. I saw recently that you are here soon at the end of the month. Maybe you're going to be meeting with Lex Fridman.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
Congratulations, super
Thank
exciting.
you.
Very cool guy. Meeting with another very cool guy. Can't wait to see that discussion. It's
Yeah,
funny.
I'm pumped.
I saw your announcement, and then I saw his today or yesterday, I think. And I had been telling my wife, like, explain like who this person was, and I was like, yeah, he's got like access to everybody. Like, he just talked to like the president of the Ukraine like last week or something. And then I
Yep.
see like he talks about you, and I'm like, yep, there's that. And then I see his lineup, and I'm like, he's talking to like every developer, content creator in existence in like a couple months span. He's already got it all lined up. He's talking to everybody. He's like, I want to talk about coding. Okay, boom, Primeagen, talking to everybody. I'm like, man, this guy's got some serious access.
You know, it's shocking what you can accomplish by just asking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not like Lex was always a famous guy.
This is true. I mean, that's
He
how
just
this
asked
situation
people.
happened.
Yeah, you just asked me.
Yeah,
Just, people need to take more risk. Take risk. It's okay. Just ask.
yeah.
Like the worst thing that can happen is the thing that's definitely going to happen if you don't ask.
That's a Wayne Gretzky quote right there.
Yeah, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. It's a fact of life. Everything reduces down. Are you copping my style though?
No,
I
no.
noticed that
Okay,
we're both.
like I noticed that too. I mean, yeah, yours is bigger or whatever, but
It's the liter plus jar. Not a big deal.
I would say it's a northern thing because Carson had one too during our talk. But I don't know. It's just is this what people our age are doing these days? Everybody's just drinking out of mason jars. We can't just go buy some glasses from the store. We're just recycling mason jars. I mean, they make a great cup.
Yeah, they have a lid too. You can have a mason jar full of water or salsa. You like it does it's crazy. It has so many use cases.
And they is assuming they don't break or whatever, they can just stay forever. Like we've got a mason jar from my wife's great grandma, I think, with like some pickled. I don't even know what's in it. And I'm afraid to open it, but I mean, it's just stayed in that condition since. I mean, it's probably been there 50 years.
Yeah, fantastic,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Mm. Well, I think this is a great place to end on. Really appreciate your time. This means a lot to me. Super
Yeah,
grateful that you are who I thought you would be when I reached out to you that day at Laracon. Sometimes, they say don't meet your heroes, but this obviously wasn't one of those situations, and I'm really grateful
I'm
for.
just a regular guy. I think sometimes people think that I'm something else. I'm just a guy. I'm just a guy, also from Montana, just like Carson is, but it's different. I'm just a dude.
Montana's putting out some legends, some mason jar drinking from legendary people. So
Yeah, Carson being really truly the king of them all.
awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate your time, and hope to do it again sometime.
Thank you. You have a good one.
You too. Take it easy.
Bye bye.